Okay, so we hear this is Maps, Advice and Stories. I'm Rob Louis from True Thoughts, and I'm joined by Aly or Gilla. What would you
Aly's fine. Yeah,
Aly's fine.
I have this thing. Is it Gilla or DJ Gilla or Aly or Aly is all good. Yeah.
And I'll ask you to sort of do this for us because so far what we've done is quite specialist. We've had Mr. Scruff talking about DJing, Ross Allen about A&R, Nikki Cute about management. But you're definitely somebody who's done, I think, lots of the different things, probably a similar route to me with DJing and a label. But you do quite a lot, and you still do quite a lot. And I think that's you've definitely got quite an interesting perspective because you work at Bandcamp as well on lots of how, especially now, the industry all fits in as far as a record label and DJing and putting on nights are concerned as well. But I guess we'll try and focus probably on First Word because it's the sort of 20 years celebration this year. I'm just going to mention it as well. I'll put the release there, but we've got the compilation which I've got. Cool. And I've got a few others there. But I guess just talking about your journey and about maybe about what you've learned and how you built up the label, and trying to get to the point to where you are today. So we've got about an hour and 20 minutes, so we'll try and keep it focused in. And as I said before this, we'll just presume you're very much into music and there's that journey there, which is, I have heard interviews with you, so I know it's very similar to a lot. At a young age, you're quite into music. But where would you say your start was, maybe getting into the actual music industry, that's beginning to start to be like, you're not just a fan buying records, you're not listening to the radio, but you're beginning to make an inroad into the industry, so to speak? Where would you say that started?
I think, look, like everyone that you speak to, we're all fans of music. It's all part of our identity from being kids. I think for me, it was so when I was at university, I went to university in Leeds, and I was actually sort of more into theatre. That's kind of what I was doing when I was at uni in my spare time. I was like acting in plays or directing, or wrote a play with a friend at one point as well. And in my second year, I just got some decks. I bought my first set of turntables, more as just a hobby, really. Like had my sound labs and my cam mixer, the bright yellow mixer with the kill switches, but that was more just, I don't know, just for fun, really. It was like a kind of something to do. And then in a theatre meeting, I met a guy called Andy Brooks, aka Testament, Home Cut, the record behind you. That's his debut single. And I met him and we became friends, and he was doing acting as well, but he was also in this group called Home Cut Directive, as they were then. It was like a sort of roots inspired 10-piece live hip hop band, with a horn section and a DJ and all that sort of stuff. And we became friends. And then there was a point where he was like, this guy has like a car and a phone. He could probably be our manager. So he sort of asked me to like manage them, which really was just like, arranging rehearsals and trying to get them gigs and making sure they got paid and all that sort of stuff. And it really grew from there. It was like I sort of did that, then kind of got, I got really, while I was at university, I got really turned on to soul music. And, I'd all grown up as like a real indie kid, devouring everything that Enemy and Melody Maker gave me. And I remember at the end of my first term of university, I went to a club called the Underground, which was underneath the old Town and Country Club, which is now the O2 in Leeds, I believe. And it was it was a Motown night called Move On Up, which still runs to this day, I believe. And I just remember going there and like feeling like, oh, there's clubs you can go to that aren't just playing Robbie Williams or whatever would have been popular at the time. And so I'd sort of started delving into that world, and then working with Andy just kind of started me thinking about, actually meeting people so I could DJ in clubs, which I did. And then running nights as well. So, we ran like a launch event for fun. We did a launch party for their website, which was a thing that people would do a launch for, which sounds ridiculous now. The website that I don't think ever really actually worked properly, but whatever. And and then through that started meeting other people. And then as I sort of got to the end of university, I then started putting on club nights. I was like working with another promoter. There was a club night in Leeds called Funky Mule, which was run by a guy called Richard Watson, who's a promoter in Leeds, still does promotions in Leeds. This guy called Colin, who ran a couple of venues, and DJ E's Nightmares on Wax. It was like their night, and they put on all the kind of, you know, Beat Nuts and Souls and Mischief and all those kind of artists that would come through town. They would put them on. And George E's was moving. He's moving to Ibiza, which is where he still is now, and they needed another partner to come in on that. So I came in and helped them run the night. We relaunched it as like a weekly night. So this is like 2001. This was, we'd run another little kind of smaller night in the university the year before. And that was the start of it, really. It was like, you know, as you know, that thing of running a weekly club night and running around town and sticking up flyers and getting to know all the people in the shops. And, you know, 1 week you're full to the rafters, the next week you have to go to the cash point to pay the DJ. You know, it's part of the learning, I think.
So you were getting in, and I guess it's that footstep into you beginning to see the mechanics, and I guess within that you're beginning to make contacts as well, aren't you? Which is, I think that was one of the things I realised when we started the label. It was like, actually, you're hitting the ground running because I booked these DJs, and now you can call them up and say, "Oh, I've got a record. Can you have a listen? Can I send it to you?" and all of that. So
no, 100%. I mean, that's how we met, right? Like we, you know, a few years on, we launched another night called New Bohemia. Which is myself, a guy called Barry, and Noah, who now runs We Out Here and Outlook and Dimensions. And that launched at the same time as we launched the label. And so I was really like, I want to book people that are going to like the music on the label. So, you know, we, you know, you came up, the first time you came up was with Al TM Duke. We had, you know, Will Quantic and Ben Nostalgia and Tom Simpson and all those, you know, those groups. We get people from Ninja Tune, we'd you know, people from Grand Central and Fat City, and that, like that's how I made the content. And then there's still people now that I'm out in London and I get introduced to someone and someone will be like, "Oh, this is Ali from Leeds." And it's like, I haven't lived in Leeds for 14 years, but you know, that's where they know me from. And it definitely helps.
It was a big part of the scene. So I remember for us as a label, you were like you know, there'd be a gig in Manchester, a gig in Bristol, and with you in Leeds, it was like whenever we've got a new artist, we're hoping, hopefully Ali, you'll like them when you try and get them to book. So that you were keeping the scene alive as well, you know, and having a touring spot that, you know, artists could do, which wasn't reliant on, you know, a big festival name or how many numbers you've got on. It was very much your night was a good night, and you tended to. I recall, you know, just if we'd send you an album, and if you like the artist and found out they're on tour, you just book them because you like their music, you know. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's funny. I sort of looking back on it now, I realized we really had a quite special thing at that point. I mean, it was like our venue was actually, I remember when you guys first came up and I pulled up with, I think you guys, well, I don't know, I was driving us into where the venue was. It was like right next to the university campus. And I remember Al saying, "Well, God, I didn't realize you'd booked us to play Biker Grove," because it was like this sort of like weird, like country house in the middle of Leeds, like in a car park, you know, look like a youth club or something. But it was in a really good location. And we just had this, like, we made it really cheap. It was like £4 or £5 to get in. Always good music, always kind of on that sort of funkier side of hip hop, soul, breaks, that sort of stuff. And and it was like I think we found it towards the end. I think we had that point where there were a lot of DJs that were really good, but weren't crazily expensive, and the numbers could work, and you could have a good club night that people were excited about coming to without having to like spend $1,000 on a DJ. And you know, and I think that would probably be quite a lot harder now, because I think it's sort of, you either get people, it seems to me now DJs are either getting like £100 or they're getting $2,000, and there's not much middle ground anymore. So
and at a time when it was maybe a bit easier to do those type of nights, it feels like it's a different climate nowadays. And you know, again, that helped with True Thoughts, that we had that ability where we didn't want to charge a lot, but we'd be able to put DJs and say, "You're going to have a really good night tonight if you want a good crowd and want to come down." And that's what we knew with that we were always saying to everybody, it was always a good crowd down there and always good fun.
No, it was always good. And you know, and like, I think we really enjoyed like the hospitality part of it. You know, we'd always take people out for dinner. Like the club that we used, that actually owned 3 clubs in Leeds and a restaurant. So we'd go to the restaurant, they'd hook us up with some dinner. And it was always just like a really nice, you know, Saturday mornings, go and do a bit of record shopping or whatever it might be. And I think like, you know, having that, like I always feel it was a real advantage for us when we started the label that we weren't in London. I think, I don't know if you found the same with being in Brighton, but it's like you sort of stand out because like you're the guys in that part of the world doing the thing. I think there was a point where there not being in London kind of held us back a bit, but I think definitely early on it helped define our identity really strongly. And also, again, like you guys, to start with, all our artists were from Leeds, Sheffield, maybe Manchester at a push, but it was very localized, and it was really like we started it because we had our friends who we felt were amazing artists and had great music, and they had no outlet, and so it was a natural thing for us to try and you know, provide that forum for them and that platform to get their music out to a wider audience.
So how soon was it that you decided to do the label from doing the night? Was this a do you thought when you start the night out you're going to do a label, or was it just you did the night?
You know what? I think the label came first, actually. So I'd kind of, you know, we wanted to put Home Cuts music out, and then through doing this night, Funky Mule, I'd met Kid Knievel, and Mike L, who's another artist on the label early on, and yeah, maybe a couple of other people as well. And then, so yeah, we kind of had the idea of doing the label, and I was sort of, yeah, I want to do this. And then I was chatting to a couple of friends, and they were like, "Oh, you should talk to this guy Andy in Sheffield. He'd be really good at doing that." So that's Andy H, who was my co-founder of First Word. And yeah, like when we met, like, I don't know, twice, and then just decided to start the business together, which is sort of mad, really. But actually, like, his skills really complemented mine. Like, he was really good with technical stuff. Like, he comes from like an engineering background. He's an amazing scratch DJ, and he was resident at the Tuesday Club, which is another, you know, really good club night on the circuit in the north. And yeah, like, you know, he was really good at sort of figuring out all those kind of things. You know, he just like, he'd go and just learn how to make a web shop, just teach himself and whatever. Whereas, you know, I could do more of the, you know, getting the aesthetics of things right, and like artwork and structuring things and the A&R and that sort of side of things. So we complemented each other really well. And then I think it was like, that was sort of the end of 2003. And then by the time March 2004 came around, which is when we launched the label, there was this opportunity to do a club night. We actually originally, New Bohemia started as we did a one-off event, which was sort of launched for our compilation 2 Syllables that's behind you there. And it was also a Love Music, Hate Racism fundraiser. So yeah, wow, takes me back. So yeah, we did this one-off event at the Faversham, and that was with Noah was like running this whole month of Love Music, Hate Racism events, and it kind of joined the two together. And then yeah, then we got the option to do a weekly night, and we just sort of went with it, and the two just grew alongside one another.
So it's one of those things, I guess, very similar. To me, is you just got on with it. You like the music, and you just thought you're going to try and create your own space to do these things. But it almost happened quite effortlessly. But you've got a passion for music, so you've got to put yourself out there, haven't you, to get into speaking to people and having that confidence as well. Sometimes to just be, I'm going to start my own night, or we're going to try and do this.
Yeah, totally. And I think I definitely had kind of overconfidence of you. I mean, actually, I remember I was thinking about this the other day. I remember being in Cannes with you at Meedem, the music conference, and we were outside some cafe or whatever, and you introduced me to someone from Germany, and I was like, "Oh, I know that company." And so I was like, "Oh, hi," and I was like, "Yeah, actually, we'd really like distribution." And I was like, you know, looking back, I'm like, "Oh God, like chill out, man. Like, you know, just need to like ease off a little bit." But I was, you know, I was young and like super eager and kind of wanted to make those connections. But yeah,
I mean, to be fair, Meedem is about that, isn't it? You go there and you go on a mission as well. I mean, sometimes, I mean, even for me at Meedem, because I think only the second time I went there, I saw Pete at Ninja Tune, and I was, getting so much information from him. He sat next to me on the flight because we'd done the Bonobo deal.
Of
And then,
course,
and then at one point, he said to me, "Look, Rob, I can't just give you all of this, info on these contacts. You've got to do some of it yourself, Which he gave me loads of info. To be fair to him, he was really good. But I was, I guess, similar to you. I was hungry, and it was just like, I want this to go. I need this to work and get that going. So yeah.
Well, I mean, that's actually so funny enough. That's actually the first time we met was, so I did a business studies MA in like 2003. 2002, 3. And for my dissertation, I did a piece on how to start a record label. And I came and interviewed you in the office in Brighton. And that's how we first met. Yeah. And you were very generous with giving me a lot of like information and guidance and tips and stuff, which, a lot of which was really useful to us early on. Because, and I like to do the same. I kind of, one of the things I really like about our part of the industry is that for the most part, you're not in competition with each other. It really is like, if I do well, you do well. If people find, like a Quantic record as it was back then, they might have found our stuff from the Haggis Horns and like that too. And like, and I think it is about kind of supporting a scene. So I do feel like it's good to share information.
And I think that's one of the things. I think I picked that up before doing True Thoughts. I remember the people who were generous with their time and information, and there were definitely people I know who were just like, oh god, they're not even giving you the remotest amount of help. They're just very worried, and I can see. I guess maybe I understand that, but I've never sort of understood that as well, because it just feels, well, if you're into music and we're not, and you can always say like Pete, and then just said to me, I was after quite a big contact of his, and he was going, you're going to have to do that yourself. We're not going to do an intro to, and I did do it at Medium. I went and cold met them and just chatted to them. But sometimes that's good. But I remember meeting you as well in hindsight. I tend to do it a lot, but when you said, I think it was a few years later, you said, you did this, and it's like, oh yeah. I'll say one thing, like background wise, like my family originally South Asian background, and yours is a similar background.
Yeah. So my parents were both born in East Africa, but my grandparents are from India. So my mum and dad moved to London in 1973, and then I was born 5 years later. So grew up. I was born in London and we lived there for a little bit, and then we moved out to like Essex, Hertfordshire. So that's kind of where I grew up. And then, from when I was 10, I was at boarding school in Northamptonshire. And then, year off after that, because I didn't do very well in my A levels, so I had to do some more. And and then ended up at Leeds in 1997.
Yeah, and similar to me, my mum was born in Uganda, but I was born in Kenya, and I came here when I was around 4. So that's. So I mean, we'll maybe touch upon that, maybe some the background and how the industry is, as far as that's concerned. But let's carry on with your story. So you're moving into, I guess, putting out your first release, and how did that go? Were you expecting it to do really well, or were you just worried, or what, a combination of both?
I don't know, in hindsight. I mean, I think when we put the first 12-inch out, that one behind you, so it was a split 12-inch, I think this was a good idea. So we had like one side was Home Cut, which was our sort of big artist that we were trying to do stuff with. And that's a track they've been playing live for years. And it's Corrine Bailey Rae on the hook on that, because she was at uni with us and was a good friend of ours.
Super famous Corrine Bailey Rae.
Super famous. So funnily enough, so 2003, when I got married, she sang at our wedding, and it was like a wedding. It wasn't like we're getting this celebrity to sing at our wedding. It was just like she needed 200 quid to come and sing some covers for an afternoon, and then then within 6 months it had all kind of blown up. But we had that on one side, and then the other side was a rapper called Tommy Evans, who was like part of that whole like Y&R low life sort of scene, which was pretty big at the time. And so we thought like, oh, it's quite good if we've got like one sort of known quantity, and then our guys, which is a new artist and not known. And that worked pretty well, I think. We were distributed by Suspect Packages back in the day, which again, Tommy kind of got us a foot in the door with them. And and yeah, it did okay. Like I think, I don't know. I mean, we really like, and you probably, well, maybe you won't empathize with this. Like we just had no idea what we were doing. I mean,
Yeah.
it was really like, I mean, we got our music pressed at Independent Pressing in Nottingham, so that was using Brain Tax was like the broker for them. And he was like what you were saying, just really unhelpful, just like really kind of like gave you the barest amount of information. And if you look at that sleeve, that's not how it's meant to look. Like it was
Okay.
meant to be that that brown edge was like on the bleed of the sleeve.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it cut. I mean, it was a bit of an ambitious design in the end, but he just sort of like didn't really tell us that it wasn't going to work. And so we ended up with this slightly odd design that didn't
Well,
really
the
make
first
sense.
compilation is that's what happened with us. My mate designed it. It looked really good on the screen, and then when we came through, it's like this is all pixelated. What's gone on? This isn't,
Yeah.
and it, that information. I guess you sort of don't know what you're doing. I, I think in our case, it was definitely they may have tried to explain, but because we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't
Yeah.
really,
Well,
do what you needed to do. So
yeah. I mean,
yeah,
we actually had this thing where we had a gig. So the day it was meant to come out, we were told we had a gig in Birmingham, like a label showcase at the Custard Factory, if you remember that,
yeah,
way back when. And we did the gig, and it was like a blizzard. There was no one at the gig because it was like horrible outside. And then me and Andy, everyone else drove back to Leeds, and it took them like 5 hours because they had to stop because like the motorway was closed and all that. Me and Andy stayed in Birmingham, and then the idea was the next day we were going to Nottingham to pick up the records because Joe had told us they were going to be ready. We drive over there, we get there, and they're like, "No, we haven't even started pressing these." And we're like, "Oh God, like we've just like driven all this way." We were so excited, like we're gonna get our new. And yeah, I still remember having like the saddest McDonald's sat in the car, like looking at the city ground, being like, "Well, this hasn't gone very well, has it?" But yeah, we it's slightly different now, I guess. But yeah,
it's all part of the learning, isn't it? All of
yeah,
these things to
yeah,
go wrong, and I think it's an important part. I mean, even you flagging up about distribution and you mentioning about meat, and I mean that's maybe something to what's your opinion now? I mean, back then it was key, wasn't it? And if you didn't have good
yeah,
distribution, it was so difficult. You were relying on the physical record shops, and I guess maybe for a generation now, at least they can distribute their music, much easier. Like obviously, Bandcamp is a brilliant example
yeah,
of that. What's your view on that difference? I guess at our era when we started, it was almost a barrier to entry because you had to pay X amount of money
yeah,
to get into the music industry. Like to do a record label, you had to have a record or a CD. You couldn't
yeah.
say I'm a record label without that. And almost by default, what's your opinions on the difference
Yeah,
between?
I know. I think that's totally right. I think yeah, you needed a way to get into market. I think it's actually a bit like it's a bit like DJing, right? Like again, back in our day, like sound like two old men. If you wanted to DJ, you had to buy some turntables and a mixer, and even crap ones would be like a few £100 probably, and then you needed like at least 40 records, maybe. Like, I mean, it's a pretty short set, but
Yeah,
you need that stuff, and that meant that there were barriers to entry, which is bad because it's good that anyone, like, and obviously now, like, anyone can,
yeah,
there's DJing like apps that you can get on an iPad or whatever, and it's free, and you plug into your streaming service. um so it's kind of like it's bad that there are barriers to entry, but it's also good sometimes that there are barriers to entry because it does sort of sort the wheat from the chaff a little bit.
yeah,
And certainly with music, there's so much out there now, it's that much harder to stand out. But I
yeah,
think, going back to your original question about distribution, like I really feel now that back then the distributors would sell the record for you. I remember being in the office, like Kudos, who we're still with now,
yeah,
and I remember
yeah,
being in the office and they'd be on the phone and they'd have the turntable and they'd be like, "Yeah, look, check it out," and they just hold the
yeah,
phone up to
yeah,
the
yeah,
turntable, and the person listening, they're like, "Yeah, what do you want? Do you want to take 20?" Like, great. Now I feel that it's incumbent on you as the label to create the demand,
yeah,
and then the
yeah,
distributor meets that demand for you. Not to undersell their skill, because
yeah,
they still need to be able to do the invoicing, get the stuff shipped, do it in a cost-effective manner. Make sure that sheets go out with all the music. I'm not doing down their skills, and obviously
yeah,
there's a whole lot more with pitching to DSPs and all that. But I do think it's now more on you to create the demand.
yeah,
And partly that's just because of the cost, right? I mean, when I was started buying records, like a single would have been £3, you know, whereas now a 12 is going to be like 15 possibly. And if you're an independent shop struggling anyway to keep up with rent and all that stuff, are you really going to take a punt on like a, you know, not on sale or return on a 12 that you're going to spend like £9? Like it's a lot to ask, you know. So I think it's a very different environment because of all those factors.
I mean, even thinking about it, we in a way, because we had to invest in ourselves, it wasn't easy still back then, because there was still a ton of labels, and it was still, but it was almost easier than now. But I remember when I started, like, Savit, Euphonic, and Grand Central, like, oh my god, how are you going to start a label now? Because they used to sell 100,000, and then it was like, well, everybody's just going to download it. But we were starting in an era like everybody's going to download this, but we were really genuinely thinking, can we sell 1,000, 2,000? Maybe we might sell 5,000 or 20,000, which we did get to, but we weren't thinking, oh, we are definitely going to sell 100,000 on this release, which indie labels could do in the 90s. But I guess with that, we, you know, I think for a new generation, and you deal with Bandcamp. I mean, what would you, you know, what we're talking about doing our nights. I mean, is there advice that you'd say to somebody if they're doing a label now? What are those things that can help you stand out, or things that we've done that maybe they could consider? Or
I'd say, like, if you're starting out, I think it's about having an angle that separates you from everyone else. Like, you know, I think if you look at something like, a good example is like the Brighter Days guys, right? Like, they've got this sound that's theirs, and, you know, they do stuff as like Brighter Days Family. It's, you know, it's kind of like this sort of cast of characters almost that are all collaborating with each other, and they've got a club night, and there's like a real strong identity to it, you know. And I think and that's actually not dissimilar to what we were doing before, right?
It's
you know,
a crew,
like,
isn't it? There's a crew thing all of a sudden.
Exactly. You know, you knew back, like, oh, like, I see that, you know, that purple and grey True Thought sleeve, like, I know what kind of vibe I'm going to get. Or you see the Ninja Tune logo or the Moax logo, like, you know what that's going to be. So I think, like, definitely, like, having that consistency, but also just having something, just a little quirk or something that kind of makes you stand out. And it's definitely, like, you know, flashing forward a little bit with the label, like, you know, I think there was a point about 10 years in where we really lost our way, and, like, we were kind of struggling to forge our own identity, and we were putting out all kinds of stuff, because, like, my music taste is super varied. Like, you know, I'm as likely to be listening to like a 90s indie record as I am like a brand new hip hop record or a drum and bass record or a 60s jazz. You know, I like all kinds of stuff. And you know, there was a point in the label where we were putting out like reggae and Afrobeat and like funky and bits of like dubstep, and some that was more like, you know, like the kind of funk, the sort of cover version funk era, which we're obviously all both very familiar with. And it was a bit like, well, anyone could be putting this stuff out. Like, it's not that it was bad music, it was just it didn't have that definition. And I think there was a point where, you know, a couple of things I realized. One was, like, just because I like it doesn't mean we're the right people to put it out, and having the confidence to say no to certain things just because it's like, it doesn't quite make sense. And also then just focusing on, like, well, what is it about us that is us, that makes us us? And, you know, I think for us that probably came about maybe about 7-8 years ago, when we kind of got into that thing of like Children of Zeus, Yasmin Lacey, Dark House Family, Kaidi Tatham, Eric Lau, Tawia, and it was all like, it all made sense within the context of one another. And because, again, you know, if you're like, you know, you'll know this, right? You get promos, right, from labels, and they'll be like, oh, I love those guys, and you check their stuff, and then you get 3 in a row where you're like, what's this? Like, I don't get it. And then you maybe don't check the next one, or you do, but you're kind of going into it feeling like maybe it's not going to be for me, you know? And so I think, like, being able to kind of, and I don't mean like do the same thing over and over again.
No, it's knowing your identity and why you're doing something, isn't it? I think that's it can take experience of doing things, isn't it? To do. I mean, we were in a similar position, because when you said this, the covers funk era. I mean, it all happened at the same time. We reached this point. Will Consick said, I don't really want to do this anymore. The Bamboos, Lance was saying, I'm not sure about this. Belle Rouge split up. And then we were like, okay, well, what is going to be the identity of the label? And I knew, I had in mind what we wanted to do, but then it can take a bit of time to just reposition yourself as well.
Yeah.
Because even for us, when Zed Bias approached us, and I was like, I think this, I was saying to Paul, this is really important because it fits in with what was going on with Quantic, but he was doing some broken beat stuff. He had some decent notes, but I said, look, I think this is the way of what I see going forward, especially on the more dance side. And you could see people going, oh, that's unusual. They said it to me, it's funny you're signing Zed Bias, but I can see why you're signing it, because I think it fitted in. And when you just listed all those names, Yasmin, Children of Zeus, it was like, oh yeah, that at that point it was like, oh God, you really, even me on the outside, I know you, I've been listening to all your music, oh, you're finding another, you've found this really good lane. And it was like, okay, I wonder what you're going to get. You're back to just like, right, I'm going to check everything. I don't, it might not. Yeah, it was that, wasn't it? So,
exactly. Well. Yeah, exactly that. And I think, and the funny thing is, I mean, you mentioned Bandcamp, and obviously, I work at Bandcamp. That's my sort of full-time job. And actually, like, that era coincided when I started my job at Bandcamp. And I think a lot of it was not having to rely on the label or DJing to earn money, because I had another source of income at that point. Because like for, 5-6 years, I mean, I've never really taken money out of the label. I've always just like done DJing because I was doing the label or whatever. And, it's the label really, being honest, the label owes me money, but, which, I could call it if I wanted it, but whatever. But it was like having that kind of not chasing things anymore, and being like, okay, well, I know I've got my money to pay my bills and that's settled. And now I'm going to make decisions that make artistic sense rather than trying to chase ones that make financial sense. Because let's be honest, none of it really makes financial sense. Like, do you know what I mean? Like in pure, if you show like the business model of a record label to like an accountant, they're just like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do this? But, we all know that's not what it's about. It's about cultural kind of, importance, and doing something that will last and that represents a community or whatever it might be. So I think that point where I was like actually able to make decisions because it made sense for the label and the artistic direction we wanted to go in, ironically, is the point where we really started doing well. So it removes those pressures, right, when you can kind of think a bit more freely.
And it's I think the one thing I like that you're quite honest about how, like, your structure. And I meet up with you and talk a lot, but you've got this structure there where there's a team there who are doing a really good job, but you've got a sort of day job at Bandcamp, but it's obvious you're not like just there. First Word has your identity, and there's you can see you care about it. But I saw Elijah recently, Black Butter, when he was posting, which I think with all these conversations, especially nowadays, you see these really bad things where people are giving advice to, if you don't, and it's like, why are you giving advice like this to young people? This doesn't make any sense. If you want, but one of the things Elijah did, I mean, he's very good at giving good advice. But I saw recently he was saying, if you're trying to do something creative, I'm paraphrasing, but don't give up your day job, because really, the way the industry is today, there's no guarantee, and it's not set in stone that you can be creative and earn money. You're better off having a part-time and just making the music. And this you just said, I think what we've seen all the time, those artists who've had part-time jobs while they were making their music for us always did so much better than the ones who gave up their job and then they take on that remix or that gig that like, this isn't going to help you because people are going to think you're there when you're trying to be here, but well, I've got to pay the rent this month, and it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So
I mean, 100%. And like, even just for me, like my DJ career really didn't go the way I wanted it to go. Like, I mean, I was playing records and really enjoying it, and that's great. And then, I got all right at it. So I got, get booked to do stuff. And then there was a point, I think, when I moved back to London from Leeds in like 2010, and, we had our daughter was born a year later, and, DJing was my job. Like, that's what I was earning money from. But then you've got to say yes to all of it. And you're like, I then ended up just playing like, hip hop 101 type nights, and it's like, okay, 1 o'clock, better play some grime, and I liked all the music, but it wasn't representing the label. It wasn't representing me, and I think it also held me back, because then people would see me play and be like, oh, he does that, and it's like, no, I do all this other stuff, but prove it. I don't see that. Do you know what I mean? And then it even bled back, where it's like, well, then when I would get like a good gig, I wouldn't really know what to do, because all I knew was how to play Jay-Z and Kanye West and whatever it was. And I was listening to a podcast a while ago interviewing a stand-up comedian who he got an award early on in his career, and then he had family responsibilities, and he sort of became like a road comic, just going out and doing comedy stores or whatever, and doing his 10 minutes. And the phrase he gave, which I thought was really good, he said, I got addicted to earning a little bit of money. And it's sort of like, it's so easy, right? Like, once you learn how to DJ, you don't have to think about it. You just rock up, you stand there for 2 hours, you get paid, you go home, right? But it's not actually progressing your career, and it's not actually representing, that's fine if that's your job and you're just like, I know people who are like, they'll play weddings, corporate events, and they're happy and they just do the job. They play what they're asked to play. Fair enough. That's never what I wanted to do. And I kind of got into that position where I was just not really doing what I wanted to do or representing what I was about. And it's taken me, again, a long time to get out of that. And that wouldn't have been possible if I needed that to earn money from. That's a simple fact.
And it's true, isn't it? You can make, I mean, that's what because I earn my wage from True Thoughts, I'll often take a gig that's offering me nothing or far less money, because I know it's going to be a good gig. Then I'll take a gig that's offering me, a bit of money, because I'm not sure. And even with me, I'm not great at doing that. Oh, you've got to play a party tunes for half an hour. I just cannot do that as well. But you're, even a few years ago, I think you definitely did something with regards to DJing that really helped me, because I'm getting, as I've been getting older, the late nights have been a bit tougher, and I was reaching this point of having children, that it's like, well, I know what I can do and what I can't do. But you did it really helped me. You did quite an honest post saying, again, paraphrasing, I'm seeing lots of my friends doing gigs, and sometimes I feel a bit jealous, but I know I'm not able to do what they do, which is often, if you're going to make a good career of being a good creative DJ, you've got to do those rubbish gigs. I mean, you've got to do those gigs. You might get paid well, and it's done by a promoter who's got a great intention, but it's not a great gig. There's nobody there, and you're playing to nobody. And that balance is the real reality of DJing. And at that time, that really helped me. It's like, oh yeah, look, I can't just pine for, I'm seeing one other artist play a really brilliant gig, but I also know they're doing 30 gigs a year and I'm doing 12, or they're doing 50, you can't be in that world. And learning about all of that, it was good. So
no, I mean, I had a thing actually. I sort of remember that. I don't remember that post, but I remember that feeling I had at a certain point. And I think it was not last Christmas, the Christmas before last. I muted like most of the DJs I know that I follow on Instagram, because it was just making me miserable. And I was like, I remember like looking at things and being like, oh, they're playing that festival, why aren't I doing that? And then I'm like, wait a minute, you don't even want to do that. You don't want to go to Newcastle to play to like 100 people. Why? You want to be at home, sit, have a roast dinner and watch the football, and I don't want to do all that. But the way that social media works, it makes you pine for it. And like, the thing is, we all know it. We did a gig for our 20th birthday in Brighton not so long ago at Alphabet, and it was a fun night, but there weren't loads of people there, and it lost us a load of money. My social media wrap-up video doesn't share that news, obviously. I just say it was a wicked night, and it was a wicked night. I had a great time. It was really good, and I loved speaking with everyone, and we connected with a lot of people I've not seen in a long time, and all good. But let's be real, it's like, it's hard selling tickets for things, particularly in this time, the time we're in now. I mean, hopefully things might get a little bit easier for people in the years to come, but life is expensive, life is hard for people, and you're competing with all these other things that they could spend their money on, and that's tough. And the reality is you've got to remind yourself, Instagram is not real. We all,
and there's
like,
so much smoke and
curate
mirrors,
it.
isn't there, within
Yeah.
Instagram? And it's so true. I mean, it's almost laughable that I think most people within the industries almost know, if you see a DJ gig where there's just the picture of the DJ, and then okay, there's not people there. If you see the crowd, oh, that was the good gig.
Yeah.
This one wasn't good.
Yeah.
But in a way that our lords and masters of the internet tell us, you've got to suppose something
Yeah.
if you've done a gig, and
Yeah.
it's a different world, and I guess we understand that. I hope there can be more truth about this, but the music industry ultimately is smoke and mirrors. If people think something is popular, there is a lot of people that will start being, oh well, if that's popular, let me check it, because it must be good if it's a bit more popular. And there are ways to manipulate that and do that. And so,
oh yeah, I mean, you're totally right about the kind of decoding, like, posts on Instagram. It's like the ticket warning post. It's like, you haven't sold enough tickets then. Like, do you know what I mean? It's not close to selling out, because otherwise you wouldn't need to tell me every hour that you want to sell tickets. So I think we all know this stuff. But and like, I kind of it's a weird thing again with how that all works. Like, we know that if you want a post to do well on socials, it needs to have your face in it, and probably, you need to kind of have some cool background, or like whatever, all that stuff that we have to do. And it's sort of, it's a game. And I think if you can play it and not let it affect you mentally, great. But I think that's really hard. And again, going back to your earlier point, I think artists who give up the day job too early, that can then drive them crazy, because you're then like obsessed with all the stuff you're not doing, rather than enjoying the things you are doing, and like, I mean, I've done quite a lot of artist mentoring, and I remember there was one person I was mentoring, and we kind of got to a thing after a few months where I was like, I don't think this is making you very happy. Like, I don't, like, if you could have a thing where she had another kind of qualification that she could do, that she was pretty good at and she actually liked. I was like, if you did that as your job, and you had like a gig once a month where you could sing jazz covers in a nice bar with your friends, would that be nice? And she was like, yeah, that'd be nice. I was like, well, why don't you do that then? Like, why worry about trying to make it your career? Because it is a huge mental toll that we put on artists. And I think feelings of inadequacy, of like, oh my gosh, why am I not doing that? Why are their numbers better than mine? Like, and not to mention, like, just the amount of putting your face out there you've got to do. Like, I mean, again, bit of a back in the day, but like, when we used to book DJs at New Bohemia, I'd turn up at the station and I'd just be looking for like some dude with a record bag. I'm like, are you Dan? All right, cool, let's go get dinner. We didn't know what anyone looked like. Now, obviously, you know exactly what everyone looks like, because you've probably asked them to do a little video and in their reels saying, like, come to the party or whatever. So it's just a very different thing.
I used to get that a lot because people wouldn't expect me to be brown. So quite often people would, sometimes they'd be a bit shocked, some were a bit more relaxed about it. And some, I remember Phil Asher and Blade were just like, oh, you Indian? And I was like, yeah, and then asking where I'm from or the roots of the family. But genuinely, I had experiences where you could almost see people like almost shocked about, oh, you're not white, or okay. And you could see it was like, it maybe throws them a little bit. But I guess, with what goes on now, back in the days, I mean, we used to sometimes, we talk about what artists were selling. I remember we did have one artist who was like, well, so and so selling more. Why are they doing that? And I could see they were just getting too obsessed. And I said to them, look, really, you're not competing with anybody. You're competing with Michael Jackson, because when you get to 100,000, you're going to look at Pruder and Dorfmeister and DJ Shadow, and then when you get there, you'll be looking at this. You've got to just get into your head about, like, what are your royalty checks potentially? How do you make a living from music? Can you make a living from music? And I've always been quite regular to everybody, and definitely more nowadays, saying to artists, look, it's the numbers that matter. About, look, can we get you off your part-time job or full-time job? That may or may not happen, but how much is there? Because I'm still not this believer of the 10,000 likes. It equates to anything, other than 10,000 likes. It doesn't. We're not seeing a real correlation between what you earn and likes on any of these platforms. So
no, I think the numbers thing's really difficult. I mean, I free to admit, I'm not very good on all the analytics and like understanding all that stuff. And, you know, I know people who get a real kick out of it and really use it to inform business decisions and all that. But it's just that stuff doesn't motivate me. And, you know, what motivates me is like great music with a great story, artists that I love the person, I want to see them do well. And being able to do a job that at the end of the campaign, you're like, yeah, I'm proud of what we did. We did our best here. And it was, and we had some really great moments, you know, because ultimately that's what, you know, that's what you remember more than the numbers. I mean, you know, we've had artists who stream really well and get really good numbers, but it's because they're on some big playlist and no one knows who they are. Like it gets played and you get some money, but like, do they actually have fans? Not really, because it's just on a, you know, Sunday study playlist or whatever that suddenly gives you millions and millions of streams. But that doesn't equate. I mean, you know, Children of Zeus are a really good example. Like their streaming numbers are good, but they're not like insane. But they can sell out Coco, like in London. I mean, a lot of tickets, you know, like, but then their streaming numbers wouldn't tell you that. But then also I know they sell a lot of vinyl on Bandcamp in particular, but in shops too. And so it's kind of, you know, I think the industry is always looking at kind of, you know, one simple magic formula that will tell you what's going to happen or what you should do. And it's like, doesn't work. That's not how humans work. Like, you know, the minute you think you've got it locked, something changes and there's a new way of doing it. So you got to kind of stay nimble with that, I think.
Just talking to Children of Zeus, I mean, it's a really interesting thing what went on there with you. I've got these two there.
Oh,
because
nice.
Obviously from seeing behind the scenes, as I understand it, when you signed them, that was just stuff that was on their SoundCloud page that had been on there for a little while, and you. I mean, we've done that, you know, on a few occasions where we've really put something out and suddenly it's captured. But that really just took off in a way. And did you have an expectation of that with the project, or was this a feeling of just I like this, so let's put it out? I mean, we can do a bit more than it being on SoundCloud. Was that?
Yeah, totally. Well, it was a really funny one. So like, I'd known Connie for years when he was in Broken English. They used to come and play for us in Leeds all the time. Although he never said hello to me because he was grumpy back then. But so I knew him and like, you know, friends on Facebook and all that as you do. And he just kept posting up this music, and I was like, this is wicked. And I remember talking to Noah, you know, I did New Bohemia with, and he was like, this is so good. And then I reached out to him, and then at one point, I think Alex Nutt from Eglo was going to put it out. And then for some reason that didn't happen. And I remember I was at Dimensions Festival, sat with Alex in the big Roman amphitheater. And I was like, oh, you know, you doing the Children of Zeus stuff? He's like, oh, no, I'm not. I was like, oh, really? And he went, yeah, no, it's not. I don't know what happened, but whatever. No beef. Like, they're still really good mates and stuff. So whatever it was. And I was like, oh, right. Okay. Oh, I really like that. And he was like, man, go for it. Like, if you want to do it, like, go for it. I was like, all right, cool. So I messaged Connie, and yeah, and I kind of had this thing at that time where I was like, I'd had a couple of bad experiences with artists where I didn't get to know them very well before we started doing stuff. And then their expectations were really off, and it ended quite badly with a couple of artists where we just weren't communicating. So I was like, I'm going to go up to Manchester. I'm going to go meet with him. And I'd never met Tyler before. So I went up, and, you know, we had some lunch and had a chat, and sort of decided like, oh yeah, let's put a 7-inch out. And we were like, oh, how many should we do? Maybe, I think we only did like 300 or 400 of the first one of Still Standing. And yeah, and that had been, so this is 2016 we put that out. That had been on their SoundCloud since 2011 or 12, maybe something like that. And yeah, and we put that out, no expectations whatsoever, and were complete, and we sort of, it went really well, it sold really quickly, and we decided not to repress the 7-inch. We were like, no, we've got loads of music in the bank, let's keep it rare, let's keep it in demand and build that audience for them. And then yeah, we did like, I think 2 more 7s, one or 2 more 7s, and then, you know, they were kind of like working towards an album, but then there was still all this stuff. There was like 13, 14 tracks that were like, some we'd put out, but a lot just on SoundCloud or other bits that had on hard drives and stuff. And then, so that's when I said to them, you know, one of the records you held up, The Story So Far, I was like, why don't we just put that out as like a kind of, and I said, let's call it The Story So Far, you know, just like the, you know, underline that, get it all out there, and then you can focus on the album. So we did that sort of, 6 tracks on the vinyl, and it's like 13 on digital. And again, with that, another thing we did, I think, put us in really good stead. We made it really affordable. So that EP was like £8 to buy in the shops, which is super cheap for like a picture sleeve. You know, I know vinyl was cheaper then, but it really, I mean, that still sells a lot because it's really good music. It was affordable. You take a punt on it. And you got, you know, the digital with all the extra bits as well. So yeah, expectations were nothing. I mean, they were really like, Connie was working in an admin job back then, you know, like it, and it was really like, even he was like, are you sure about doing a 7-inch? Like, will people want it? And I don't know. And, you know, and actually, funnily enough, I remember being on the train home that night from Manchester. And I'd actually, at that time, I was freelancing for Bandcamp 2 days a week. I just started doing a bit of work, like signing up labels and stuff. And I remember being on the train home and thinking like, God, I probably spent £100 today, and this is probably not going to make me any money. Like, you know, this thing. And I was like, look, you know, if I think it's worth spending £100 going to Manchester to sign this band that probably won't go anywhere, then it's probably worth me going to California to go and meet with the people at Bandcamp and try and get a job, which is what I did. I just sort of booked a flight, emailed them and said, oh, I'm going to be in California. Can we meet up? And from there, I got offered my full-time job with them, which obviously changed everything. So
quite a
that
big thing with, you know, in
huge.
a way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Really,
Wow.
like in loads of really weird ways. It was like a massive moment. And
but the
and
build up
yeah,
to that point is quite a while, isn't it? So First Word
yeah.
has been running for well over 10 years by then. Is that right?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
So yeah, we started in 2004. So yeah, we were like 12 years in at that point. And yeah, you know, I think early on our sort of first successes were like Kid Knievel, which did quite well. Haggis Horns, you know. So we did 2 albums with them, a couple of 12s and a 7-inch as well. And then just before their second album, sort of my main contact in the band, Jason Ray, he was Corrine Bailey Rae's husband. He died like very tragically, sort of was like an accidental overdose effectively. And I mean, he wasn't a long story, you know, but quite very sad, very upsetting, and kind of weird because it was like we were sort of in the middle of a bit of a media storm as well, because Corinne was massive at that point, and you know, we had like BBC ringing us up and newspapers, and we just refused to say anything at all. We just didn't. We just, you know, just didn't reply to
Wow,
anything.
so you got caught in that side of things as well.
Yeah.
Wow,
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember.
And you did the best thing by not speaking as well, didn't you?
Yeah. It just, you know, these things just kind of add to the collective
Yeah.
misery of the world, and we just didn't really want to get into it. So yeah, so we, you know, that was quite good. We did the Simon Sound record with DJ Format, which did pretty well. A real Astrobeat orchestra. So, you know, like similar to you guys with like QSO and Bamboos. It was like those kind of like funk Afro bands did quite well. But yeah, like I think after Haggis and stuff, and like, yeah, just nothing was really catching particularly. Like it was fine, like we were doing okay, but you know, I think we were in a point where streaming hadn't really kicked into gear by that. I think we were probably still in the iTunes era then, sort of early 2010s, right? And you know, 7 Digital and Juno Download and eMusic and all these kind of things. Yeah, and then it was kind of a weird few years, I guess, for us at that point. You know, just trying to kind of find that next thing that would make sense. And actually, you know, going back, the one big thing that happened in that period in 2014 that was, again, I think a bit of a catalyst for us was the Record Store Day project, Nothing Leaves the House, that we did.
Oh, yeah.
So again, that was just a thing where it was like, I want to do this because I think it would be fun. So the idea was we got Kick and Evil, Tall Black Guy, and Eric Lau. They went to Mr. Thing's house for the day. They could sample anything they wanted from his collection, but tagline, Nothing Leaves the House, you know. And that we put out as a double 7-inch, which came out on Record Store Day 2014. And I still, it's one of my favorite memories of running the label was we were out in London on, London on Record Store Day. Then it was like, they had a massive like sound system outside Sounds of the Universe, and like everyone was out, and it was just a real buzzy kind of day. And I remember going into Sounds of the Universe, and they sold out of our record, and I was like, oh, I've got some here, do you want some? They were like, yep, definitely. So I just pulled like 20 of them out, stuck them in the racks, and like 4 people grabbed them straight out of the thing, and I was like, wow, this is cool. This is exciting. And again, I think that was something that like we did for the right reasons, just because we loved it. I mean, actually, I have missed out Tall Black Guy in there, who we did a couple of records with before, and they did very well for us, and were quite big things. But from doing that project, we met Eric Lau properly. We then did his music. Eric introduced us to Kaidi, who we've done a load of things with, to Tawia. So there was kind of
it feeds in, doesn't it? And I think the big thing for speaking to you is, and what I've seen, my experience is just the same as yours. When you can be that focus, and I don't know why, but this is going to be enjoyable. And because I think, even looking back at particularly Children of Zeus, at that moment in time, it wouldn't be an obvious thing that, particularly for some of my era, or even a little bit younger than me, which you are, you wouldn't necessarily be thinking, you'd almost be thinking, oh, this is in inverted commas retro, but it wasn't. It was something that was like, this is just can connect with another younger generation, but also the older generation as well. And it takes something sometimes, which I think is a good A&R does, is just seeing like there's a niche that isn't this obvious. The Star magazines or the trendy people aren't necessarily talking about it, but it is good, and I think they'll come on board, which did happen with Children of Zeus as well, didn't it?
Yeah,
it really came through. So
totally, and I think I really feel, if you go into things for the right reasons with good intentions, I think good, without wanting to sound all sort of woo-woo, whatever, but I do think good things come back from it. And like when I've gone into things cynically, they've gone badly, and they've come and bitten me, because you're not going in with your truest self, or your kind of with clear and well thought out intentions. So I do think like those in that era, the Record Store Day one and the Children of Zeus one were things where so many good things have come from those moments, but they really came from a genuinely kind of like, I just love this and want to do. I mean, like the Record Store Day one, I was just like, this is a cool idea. I just like it. I think it's fun. Like, why not? And again, I think it leans in to one of the most important parts of, like, I think how you A&R, but also how you sell individual records, is storytelling. People love stories. They want to know, like, why was this made, who made it, what's the thing, and what's the hook, and I think when that sort of thing writes itself, that's when you're in a good place, right? And you know that, well, I get this, other people like me will get it too, and maybe some others, and kind of go from there.
So with the structure of First Word, with you as A&R, so with me at True Thoughts, I'm an A&R, but I co-own the label with Paul. And Paul's a good co-owner, because he sometimes knows if it's making no sense, but I'm saying, we've got to sign this. We do have to give them a bit of advance. There aren't any numbers or anything that I can tell you to do it, but just, look, I've got this feeling. And he often says, no, I can just tell by the way you're talking about this. We just need to do it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But for you, and I can equally go, oh, look, let's do this. And they want X amount of money. And Paul's like, look, I think this is a bit risky. And sometimes you need someone to say that to you and just be like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, this maybe it's not going to work for the template that we do. It's like, okay, let's pass on this, because even though we like it, the artist needs or the manager's needs are over maybe above what we would normally do on certain projects, and that's it. But for you, how does that process work? Are you bouncing ideas of other people, or are you good at doing it yourself, do you feel?
Yeah, good question. So like the first 10 years of the label, it was me and Andy H running it, and like I was sort of leading the A&R, but he definitely had a say in it too. But I think we got to a point where a lot of the stuff we were putting out wasn't really his. I think it's funny with me and Andy, we both come from quite different places musically. And when we started the label, we kind of crossed over, and then we kind of carried on going in different directions a little bit, which is fine. And I mean, we're still mates and everything. There's no falling out, but I sort of bought him out of the label, like 10 years ago now, I guess, something like that. And then, it's really much kind of very much sort of my decisions, but so now the structure we've got is like, yes, I'm kind of I own the label outright, and I do the A&R and some of the accounting stuff and, you know, strategy type things. I've then got Bobby, Boba Fett, he's a great DJ and someone I've known for a long time. So he's been with us since 2016, 17, something like that. Like, you know, around that sort of Children of Zeus time, I guess. Yeah, probably 2016, actually, thinking about it. And so he does all the sort of day-to-day management of the label, you know, dealing with the distributor. He does all our social media. He does a lot of the kind of content creation for that as well, you know, registrations and coordinating all that sort of stuff, like, you know, running the campaigns. But obviously he's a great DJ and he's got a really good ear. So I definitely bounce things off him before I do anything. I mean, you know, ultimately it's my decision. There's things that he's really felt we should do, and I was just like not quite convinced, and we didn't do it. And there's other things where he's like, I don't really get it, but it's your thing, man. So go for it, and you know, that's fine. So yeah, you know, he's probably the still feels a similar role, but from a different place as Andy, I guess, in that like it's kind of was more my decision, but I definitely listen to what he has to say and take his opinion very seriously, and you know, treat it quite reverentially, I guess. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. And you know, and I think a lot of what I do, the way I do it now, and I've used this metaphor before, and kind of harks back to something I was saying earlier, but like, you know, sort of how you structure that, your release schedule is a bit like a really, really long DJ set. And it's sort of like the pieces have to kind of fit a little bit. And like, you know,
I never thought of that. That's actually quite,
well, like, you know, and I think the thing is, you earn the right to throw in a curveball every now and then, right?
Yeah,
but,
which is, I mean, you say that, I'd never thought of our release, but I'm always saying, you know, we are saying, we've got this going on, so we've got to throw in something so it's not all two the same, but we really, and I'm always about, well, we need the curveball, we've got to have something there. We just don't know what it's going to do, but let's do it. So,
but then if you do 3 curveballs in a row, your audience is like, what the hell? Like, should we go get a drink? Like, you know, so I do, you know, I do really sort of think about that. And also just like that thing of like, you know, we've got limited resources. You know, if you're putting out, you know, 3 records from female soul singers from the UK in a row, like that's a lot to ask of, like, you're going back to the well again and again and saying, you know, Clash magazine, can you cover this or whatever it might be? It's like you can't really do that. So it's sort of, you know, I feel like we've got these parameters of what we do with kind of, you know, Kaidi and the sort of broken beat boogie stuff on one side, and then Children of Zeus and the sort of soul stuff on another, and you know, and then you got some of the jazz bits that are kind of outliers to that. But I think I try and kind of keep that through line and that connectivity. And like, you know, recent example that really made sense, you know, we put Amanda Whiting's album out, which is, you know, a spiritual jazz harp record, right? It's quite different to a lot of what we do. But before that, she did a record with Don Leisure, who's done a bunch of albums with us, you know, solo and with Dark House Family. And they did a collaborative record. And then we did her solo record. So it made sense. There was a narrative there that meant that was comprehensible to our audience, you know. So yeah, so I definitely have that. I like kind of looking at the year and trying to give a shape to it, and sort of, you know, and actually funny enough, like last year, we deliberately did less stuff. Like I was just like, it's getting too much, and like juggling all the responsibilities is a lot. So we kind of slowed things down quite a bit. And then this year, with our 20th year, we've sort of hit the accelerator again. And I'm now just like, oh bloody hell, there's quite a lot to do, you know.
But it's brilliant. I love the Alicia Joy. The Quiet Dawn album is amazing as well. I mean, that's so good, that album. So
he's brilliant, you know. I mean, he's a great example actually of what we were talking about earlier. He has a day job. He makes the music because he loves making it. It's interesting because, you know, his stuff, he's not like a household name, you know, he's not, you know, within our scene, you know what I mean? But his music's really good. And just, we've released a lot of records for him. Never really made money on it. But every record we get a few more fans, and it builds and builds and builds. And he's now kind of got a little bit of an audience. Yeah, I mean, I think it's such a brilliant record, and like really interesting that he like, you know, the first stuff was more kind of jazzy hip hop bit, you know, new jazz, some more kind of boom bap sort of stuff. And then he really kind of like vibed off all of the broken beat stuff, you know, some of which we were putting out, some, you know, you're putting out, or 2000 Black, or, you know, various other labels. And then that's really become his sound now, but with this kind of his own twist on it. And
he's nailed it. It's like a good new, like forward thinking, but you could see the influences, but it's also, this wasn't, it couldn't have come out in the 2000s. It was like, this is for now as well, but with references to what was going on there. It's really, really done well.
And that's the thing, is like, you know, that's not a release that I expect to make loads of money or make loads of waves or anything, but it's, you know, talking about that DJ set thing, it's just bang in the middle of what we do. It is what we are. And so it's like, it really adds to what we do by kind of, you know, just showing like, we're not just about Kaidi or Children of Zeus or Alicia. Like, you know, we put up, there's this other stuff that we do that's just, if you like all that stuff, you will like this. Like, you absolutely will, even if it's not the biggest name in the world, you know. But yeah, he's he's to work with, and I love his music. He's you know, he's a really, really talented guy. I kind of want to get him producing for other people, because I think he could do some really cool stuff. Yeah.
So one of the things, we briefly chatted earlier before we did this, but I think one of the things I did want to mention is that early on, when you know, in the early days of the label, and when we were meeting up, and I remember I was asking, you know, how you do it, you know, how you doing, are you earning the living from doing it? And you were quite honest with me. You said, look, I'm okay, because my family have given me a bit of support, so it's not like I'm desperate. So, but you're one of the few people I've ever heard because I'm generally asking people, you know, you know, you know, are you doing all right? But you were very honest and very transparent about that. And I know there's lots of talk in the general music industry. I've been doing sort of mentoring, particularly with people who maybe came from, you know, sort of poorer backgrounds. And when people ask me within the industry, you know, what can we do more? The thing I'm beginning to say more, and I do mention you, I said, you know, Aly was just really honest, because I think sometimes when you come from a poorer background, you think, oh, I can't do that, you know, because they've been able to. But understanding, look, if somebody's got, you know, it's a slight advantage. It's still hard in the music industry, but it just gives you that understanding. It's look, I'm always saying to people, it might just take you a little bit longer if you've got to save up for £1,000 rather than can ask your mum and dad for it. It's just going to take you a bit longer to get there, but don't worry about it. Like, the industry doesn't stop once you're 21 or once you're 30, or once you're 40. It carries, and if you believe in it, it's just, and you learn as you do all that, you know. So and I love that you were really honest about that. I mean, I said to you, I've always liked you, because I've always thought you got a good heart and you're into the music and you're doing everything for the right reasons. So I've always loved when we catch up and chat up. But I really like that when you.
Oh, thank you. Well, no, likewise, Rob. I mean, yeah, you were very generous with me early on with your time, which was really useful for us. And like, not everyone does that. But yeah, like, it's a funny thing. Like, I think we're very, within the music industry, or within British culture, right? We're kind of very obsessed. No one likes to call themselves middle class, right? Like, upper class people will say they're upper class. Everyone else says they're working class, right? And but that's not the case, obviously. Like, you know, I think a lot of people in the music industry come from comfortable middle class backgrounds, right? Because who else has got the leeway to mess about and do stuff that makes no sense financially? And like, you know, it was a funny thing with my parents. Like, they never really understood what I did. They didn't really like it. But my dad in particular was very much like, well, I want to help you anyway, which was very generous of him and very nice of him. I mean, sometimes that came with strings attached, and, you know, he'd put things on me and whatever. Anyway, but yeah, you know, I had a bit of a loan from them to start with, which I eventually paid back to him, and then he just gave it back to me because, you know, it was dad stuff, like, you know, whatever. And you know, and at certain points where I was like, you know, I want to do this thing, but I need a bit of leeway. Like, they helped me out with a little bit of money, or, you know, they helped me buy my first house. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of parents would, if they're fortunate enough to be able to do it. But I think it's a weird thing, because, like, you know, I definitely had periods where I've tried to pretend I'm something I'm not, and like trying to pretend that I'm from this difficult background, or, you know, whatever. It's not the truth, right? You know, like, you know, as you were alluding to earlier, you know, by not being a white person in this industry, you have disadvantages in the same way that if you're not a man, you would have disadvantages, or if you don't have money, you would have disadvantages. I think, you know, that kind of intersectionality around privilege and all of that, and the different sort of head starts and disadvantages that you have. Like we all deal with those in different ways. But yeah, look, the truth of me is that like, my mum and dad came here with very little, but they had qualifications and they worked very hard, and they did well, and they sent me to a boarding school, which was not cheap, I would imagine. I mean, I had a scholarship and stuff, but still, it was like, it's a lot of money. And that is my background, and I don't, I've sort of, I don't want to say I'm proud of it, because that's sort of a weird thing to say, but like, it is what it is, and I don't think there's no need to hide from it.
And I think I wish it could be more like that in general, because I think sometimes when you're talking to people, they'll talk about their savings and this or that, the other. And I remember, the early days when I'd chat to people and we're like, "Oh, you're suddenly buying turntables," and they go out for my savings, and it's like, you haven't got a job, Why don't you just say, "My mum and dad gave me." There's nothing wrong with that. I want to become a DJ. Totally. I can get some money, and I think I feel like in the industry in general, hopefully these conversations can be, because I do think it makes people feel a bit like, oh, it's hard, but I don't think there are. It can just sometimes take a little bit longer, but there's always somebody, for a lot of people, there's somebody that does help you, as you said, whether it's time or finances, but there's still so much to do. I don't think necessarily you're going to make it, even if somebody gave you a blank check. You can still just cane it all in the music industry and have a catalogue that's rubbish, because it could be really easy to do that. So there's still a lot of skill involved. So.
No, absolutely. And I think also, like, I mean, one of the things I think that where actually having that little bit of support sort of didn't benefit me was that right from early on, I've always kind of had I've never worked for someone else in the music industry until I started working at Bandcamp. And that was quite a different thing. And I think it was always like, oh, he has his own thing. Like, he would employ people, not I would go and get a job somewhere else. And I sometimes kind of think, oh, if I'd like gone to London in 2007 and gone and like interned for Giles or something, would that have opened more doors for me? Do you know what I mean? Because a lot of it is just about being in those places. Now, obviously, you can't afford to go and intern for free or very little unless you've got a bit of support from somewhere else. I get it. It's not that simple for everyone. Certainly not now. But yeah, I do think about that sometimes, about how, like, yes, it was obviously good because it meant I could get things moving and I could, like, not have to. The main thing was actually, to start with, was not having to wait till we made the money back on the first one before we made the second one, which helps you build momentum and all of that. Sadly, the third, fourth, and fifth ones sold really badly, but that's another story. But I think also then, you're kind of like, I think with us as well, like, everyone sort of assumes that we're always doing all right. Whereas actually, like, the truth is, I mean, okay, now I'm employed, Bobby's employed full time. I've got Sam, who does our like bits of publishing and accounting, who's 1 day a week. I've got a guy doing mail order 2 days a week. I've got Neil, our radio guy, 1 day a week. And we've just taken on Rohan, from Daytimers, 1 day a week, helping with like events stuff and a few other bits. So we are paying people, but I'm not taking any money out. And obviously, if I did everything myself, I would and could do okay. But I think, like, the reality of the economics of labels is quite different. And most of the labels, I mean, there was a really interesting thing that Darren Hemming was writing in his newsletter. I don't know if you get that, the Motive Unknown one. It's really good. He's got a Substack thing. And he was just sort of pontificating on, like, whether a label like XL could even happen anymore. Like how would that happen? Because, like you were saying earlier on, you're not selling 100,000 copies of something, which is what you need to then go to that next level and be like, I mean, okay, it happens occasionally, but, it's very, very rare. So,
because we can function today because we've got back catalogue, and so when we come into people, but what we're seeing now is, normally we were able to, okay, we'll give you X amount, we'll sell 1,000 CDs, 1,000 and you'll get it. But now we're saying to people, I think you're gonna have to wait 5 years if you're gonna luck out and get 1 million plays on your album. It might take that long. And then it's like, well, if we're giving this advance, how many advances do you give? Because we know you've got to keep doing music. So there's a different template, isn't there, now for a new
and I think absolutely that. And I think also, like, when I started, I spoke to you and I spoke to other people, everyone's like, here's the deal you give, 50-50, no advance, get the publishing, all that stuff. It's like, you just can't do that now. You can't do that every single time. I mean, I think still the majority of our deals, I think all our deals are 50-50 deals, you know, and we whatever. But then there's different, like different calculations of advance and whatever. And you know, and
And
I
budgets you
really
spend as well, isn't it? With certain projects as well.
absolutely,
So,
yeah, you know, and I think actually the hardest thing is sometimes when you've got something like an Alicia Joy or like Tarwea, where it's like, this could be massive, like this really could catch and go big, or it could just do fine. But it's like, do I gamble? Do I like, you know, do I stick or do I twist? You know, and I always want to kind of try and do the best we can for the artist. You know, what I always say to them is like, you know, when we're talking about signing someone, one of the first questions I ask them is, well, what do you want? Like, what's your goal? What do you want out of this release? What do you want out of the next one? What do you want? Where do you want to be in 5 years? What is it that you're looking for from, why are you coming to a label? Why do you need us? And kind of working with them to understand what it is they need. And then really the job is for us is to help make them the best version of themselves that they can be as an artist, like to give them the tools and the guidance and the strategy and the money sometimes to achieve their goals artistically. You know, and sometimes in having those conversations with people, I'm just like, yeah, we're not the right people. I love this, but I'm not going to be able to do that for you. And better to be honest now rather than find out halfway through a campaign and I've just like, you know, ruined your 3 years of work and you've bled your heart and soul into it, and we've kind of not quite able to do what you want. And I think
it's important to find. I mean, we
yeah,
almost send it on an email to everybody. Just let us know what your expectations are, and
yeah,
I literally got a sentence on the email saying, please don't say not much, because we've had somebody say not much for a video where they meant zero because their friend would do it, and
yeah,
someone say not much and it was £2,000, and it was like that. You know, that is different. You
yeah,
know, we don't know what that is.
yeah,
Ali, just one thing. I know we're running out of time a little bit.
yeah,
Maybe just touch on how's your experience being brown in the music industry?
yeah.
Have you had any feelings of overt racism or glass ceilings, or do you get any feelings about what things could have been? Could things have been different if you were a white male, or you know? I'm
Yeah,
curious about.
it's a really interesting question. I mean, I have such a funny experience of life in that way. Like I remember thinking about, I was talking to a friend about this a few years ago, and I was saying it's such a funny experience because like being Asian, like my experience of growing up in London where there was like overt racism all the time, you know, and what we saw in the summer in the UK was like, oh yeah, it was like that all the time. Like I'd forgotten it used to be like that all the time, like people being so emboldened just to say stuff to your face or whatever. And sort of my parents sort of response to that, I guess, was like fit in and kind of make yourself a little bit invisible. Just don't take up too much space. Don't speak loudly when you're out in public. Don't draw attention to yourself. Just you know, be the good immigrant or whatever, to coin a phrase, right? And then I went to a boarding school where you're taught that you're the most important person in the room and you've got to be super loud and confident and all of this stuff. And like those two things kind of working against each other is quite a weird, it's quite a weird balance to pull off. But yeah, I don't know if I've experienced overt racism in our scene.
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm sure there is stuff there because that's the world and
yeah,
people are racist, and that includes people in groovy music industry
yeah.
media jobs, and just as it would include people on a building site. So I'm sure there's stuff there, but yeah, I think like the big thing for me that's really changed, and again, it's kind of an identity thing. I think when I went, my school I was at, I was one of two non-white people in a year of 200. Um, and I became very um ashamed's the wrong word, but I didn't want to draw attention to my culture and my heritage at all. To the point where like if I was playing a Beatles album and like, you know, Within You Without You came on, which has a sitar in it, I'd skip it when I was with my friends because I just didn't want the association, right? And
It's that's I mean, definitely for my age, that can be quite normal. I remember going to the cinema once and someone was going, I can really smell curry. And I knew my mum had cooked a curry, which was really nice. And it was me. And I just didn't say anything. Whereas nowadays I go, and that's me. It was really nice. I had a curry at it, But when you're a bit, I was a teenager at that point, you're a bit nervous about
totally, yeah. So,
and especially back then, you know, it was a different world, wasn't it? So,
absolutely. So, you know, I kind of had that thing of sort of burying that down and whatever. And then really like seeing what Daytimers and Dialed In and all those guys are doing, it's so inspiring. It's just like I'd never have imagined that stuff like that would happen, not in a million years. Like, because you know, we just didn't have role models like that. You know, like when you're a kid, it's like, what have you got? You've got like Sanjay in EastEnders. Like, you know, like I don't know, like, you know, cricketers and stuff, but again, that's sort of like not cool in the same way, and you know, whatever. So kind of, I think, like, I mean, I can't get to it because there's too much crap in my office, but I've got like a little Star Wars figure of Riz Ahmed from when he was in. So I was like, this is mad that there's like a brown guy in Star Wars and he's got a little figure. Like that's massive, you know. And so I
don't see. I've got that in my. I've got a separate room with records, and that's in there because it's like, oh my god.
It's, you wouldn't even, you know, like, you know, and I know I've sort of knew Riz because he used to go out with my mum's best friend's daughter, so I sort of known him as he was kind of coming up, like not well, but you know, and sort of see that journey was amazing. So so I think like I'm definitely more comfortable in my own skin now, and definitely like feel like it was so great. Like we played at the same daytime as venue, playing the day, I was playing the evening, and just going in somewhere and it just all being, you know, people of color from, you know, the different countries and from the diaspora, and it was brilliant. And just sort of to know that and also actually to feel like just because I'm in this thing doesn't mean I just have to, you know, play a load of Bhangra. Like it's fine, like do what I want, it's okay. And you know, but although I did really enjoy like putting together a few special things and some little edits and, you know, original samples and then some hip-hop tunes and all that sort of stuff.
And it felt the place to do that as well, didn't it? I think
100%. Yeah. So like I feel it's in a good place now, and it's really nice. I mean, I'm always really aware as well that, like, you know, we put out black music and I'm not black, right? And that's a thing that I think about a lot. Like, you know, the compilation that we did, and, you know, like I thought really long and hard about a compilation I've done and putting two black women on the cover. And I'm like, am I appropriating things here? Am I, you know, kind of piggybacking on culture? And, you know, and I spoke to a lot of friends about it and kind of, you know, and I think it's important to interrogate yourself and your intentions with all that stuff, you know, because like, okay, I'm not, you know, I know we're not doing some of the things that other people have been doing in terms of like, you know, outright racism and stuff like that, or like, you know, racist structures and stuff. And, you know, we've always employed people from all kinds of backgrounds and you know, different demographics and whatnot. But also it's then like, you know, are you taking cultural capital as a person from outside of a culture? And what does that mean? And what's your responsibility as a person with influence or with a, you know, with a platform or whatever it might be? So that's stuff I think about a lot, you know, because,
and it's good. I mean, I'm the same as you. I mean, ever since the label began, I've always thought about that. And it's interesting. All our artists, I think, do think of that because as a label, we're so heavily influenced by black music. You know, without a doubt. You know, that's the situation. And I think, and I guess since, at least from my experience, since the Black Lives Matter movement in this country, it almost feels a bit easier to speak out if you're feeling uncomfortable with something or something's going on. You're just able to talk in a way that, at least for me, that I've never been as free as, you know, to be able to talk like that, and that seems like a positive thing as well. So I think we're running out of time, aren't we? You're going to need to go on.
I'm just gonna delay my next thing by 5 minutes just so that we can wrap up. The multitasking is real. I'm just gonna let my friend know. I think definitely. I mean, I think around all this stuff around kind of identity and you know, even what we're talking about in terms of like finance and stuff like that, I do think it's really beneficial to have honest conversations and be open about it. Like, I think one of the things that's really difficult in our industry No one knows what anyone earns. No one knows like what are my expectations? Like, if you're going to go and be a nurse, you look online and say starting salary 29 to 35 or whatever, and you could end up there. Like, we have no idea. Like, and no one talks about it. And I think, and again, everyone's like, their Instagram profiles have their best clothes with all the right labels on them and all of that. But, not everyone's walking around that like that every single day. That's not how it goes. Like, so
before this started, we both showed our hugely messy floors. There's loads of records on there. We've got the tiny bit. Just I just had Ali, I cleared that chair up. We just had a load of rubbish. It just chucked on the floor. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, so I do think there's like, I hope we can get to a place where there is greater honesty and greater kind of conversation about that stuff. Because I was chatting to a friend of mine who is a woman of Asian origin, and she was working as a junior manager for an artist management company for like a pretty big indie artist who's like, produced for big artists, worked with, collaborated with very large artists. 2-3 years into the job, and she was earning like 27 grand living in London. That's not enough to live, like coming on for 30 years old, So it's like, and she had to quit that job because she was like, I can't afford it. I can't live. And she had to get, she got another job in music, but in a more sort of a different role, which meant that there was a bit more money there, and of course, like we all have to pay our dues. But I think like it is there are a lot of barriers there. And I do think like kind of, there's an organization that I think everyone should check out called Arts Emergency, which is it was formed sort of after the 2015 election when the Tories won again. And the idea of it was to improve access to the arts for people from working class backgrounds. So they've got like a mentorship program where basically if you're a person in the arts, whatever that art, they're very kind of broad in terms of different things that they support. You can go in and mentor a young person. And, they said sometimes what they need is they just need a pushy middle-class parent to help them. Number of kids who like, they don't get their first choice thing. And then they're like, oh, well, I haven't got it. And it's like, no, ring up, like try and get a place here, call up here, all that sort of stuff that like, more kind of engage. And like some people that don't have parents, or they just don't have parents who would think like that. So,
or that one understanding, if you're sending one email, that's not enough. You've got to then do a follow up, and then do a, third or fourth, you might be like, they're going to blank you, but there's a way to do that, isn't it? And I think you can be scared. And sometimes it's just hearing people say that. I've definitely said that when I'm mentoring people, it's like, you just got to think minimum 3 emails if you're trying to get in touch with someone and get a response, that's it. But sometimes you just genuinely don't know that, do you? You don't know.
No, of course. And I think, like even just knowing like how to present yourself in an email, how to, I talk about like how to send demos all the time, because I'm just like, please don't send me an essay. Please don't make me download like a 1 gig folder to listen to your beat tape. Like it's just not going to happen, But yeah, like I do think it's really kind of important to widen access, but also to be real about what it means and what the possibilities of this industry are. Because there's a lot, as in wider society, there's tons of money floating around in it. There's billions and billions. But, if you're trying to do something that is like, artistically in a particular lane that maybe will never be the mainstream, there are limitations there. Like there are, and you can get lucky. Obviously, you can have big sinks come in, or suddenly a record just flies off in whatever direction. But, the reality is that it's if you're getting into it for artistic reasons and you want to stick to that, your artistic sort of ideals, that has a cost. Like that has a fallback in terms of what you might be able to earn from it, which is, is a decision for people to make, right?
Yeah, and I think that's good advice, isn't it? You've just got to, if you want to go full time. I think as we get into the end, I'm just maybe a little summary of maybe anybody listening to this, and I'll pick up a couple of things that I thought were really good that you mentioned, particularly with signing from the A&R people, which I guess it's something I take for granted. I know you can do Zooms and all of that, and which you'll do
Yeah.
if somebody lives abroad. But when you said about going up to Manchester and
Yeah.
chatting with Children of Zeus, I remember doing that with Dave Zed Bias and thought, let me just go up and chat
Yeah.
with him and do that. And that made a huge difference. And
Mm.
Dave wasn't sure about us, potentially about doing the music with us. We weren't sure. I did want to do the music with him, but there was also a bit like, look, I think this is going to be better for me to look. Can we actually deliver what he might need as well? And meeting up, I thought that was really good advice. So, what from what you've said, if you were to sort of summarise, what were the sort of key points you think if somebody's thinking of doing a label or themselves and that A&R role within the label? What would your sort of quick point of advice be?
I think with the label, I think it's about like defining yourself and what you're doing is separate from what other people are doing. Like, why does your label need? There's millions of labels out there, probably literally now. Why does yours need to exist? And what is it? What's the hook that's gonna set you apart, or even not set you apart, but guide you? Do you know what I mean? And make sure that you stick to the thing that you do. What's your kind of to use a business term, USP? What sets you apart? I think that's really important. And then I think with the A&Ring, it's about, again, sticking to that that concept and that idea that you have and your ideals, setting that out, being reflective about it and understanding, like, actually I said that, but that's wrong. Like, we can't do that thing that I thought I wanted to do, and let's pivot here. That's fine. But just making sure that it all makes sense within the context of itself, particularly when you start out, you want that consistency. You all know it when you have it, where you're like, if you go back a few years, like a label like Temper, and it sort of pops up, and you're like, what the hell is this? And then anytime you see that label, like, I need that, I want to check it out because it's this new sound of music, or whatever it might whatever that might be. Like in more recent years, something like International Anthem in the jazz world, they just nailed it. And it was like, I don't necessarily like everything they put out, but I'm going to check it out because it's going to be interesting. And to go back to your point about going up and spending time with the people you're going to work with, yes, it's good to show willing and to meet person face to face. Also, life is too short to work with people that you don't like. Like, you got I want all the artists we have, they're all people I'd gladly sit down and have dinner with, or go and have a drink with, or just talk crap on the phone for half an hour. Like, and I think that's really important because things do get difficult and things don't always go to plan. And I think if you've got, like, you don't, sometimes it can be hard if you're like, working with your best mate, and that can be tricky. And I've definitely had issues with that before. But I think just having, someone who you actually actively want to spend time with, there's nothing worse than the phone rings and you see a name and you go, oh, like, I'm gonna have to do this now.
And it doesn't mean you're hanging out or calling each other every day.
No.
But it means you're happy to have a conversation. And I think that's what I generally quite like. Is, you can have, even that we out here, when I saw Stephen and Babadeli and Tara, they would talk, we both of them, we talked about riots and all of that going on, because it was, as much as we're talking about music, it's like, how you're feeling after that. We were both, all of us, talking personally about our experience of this all going on, and it was actually quite therapeutic just doing that, and having someone that you can just do that with as well.
Absolutely and it's I think also as well, like, as much as you want to have the artist part of what you're doing, they've got to want to be part of it too. I want the artist to be excited about working with each other, or just even hanging out with each other and bouncing ideas. Like, Alicia came around here a few weeks ago and I played her some upcoming stuff that we've just got in, and she was like, I'm going to go home and write. This is great. And I was like, that's brilliant. That's perfect. She's inspired by it, and like in the same way that they would have been inspired by her. So I think that's, when that happens, it feels great. It feels great to see people collaborate with each other in that way.
And that's nice within a label, isn't it? Again, that sort of crew mentality can be quite nice, can't it? That you feel like, okay, we're all trying to do something, all of us here together. So
giving sort of different perspectives of the same route, and like having those reference points. I think it's a really healthy thing.
Brilliant. And just before, I know you're meant to sleep on now, but can you do a quick mention for the compilation? As well. So
sure. So this is like a real labour of love for me. I've kind of had this idea about 5 years ago. I just, with Children of Zeus and Yasmin, and other things like Linda Dawn, who we've done a bit of work with a sub label that we work on, and others. There's just so much great British soul music, and I had this idea of like I love compilations were like what got me into DJing, you know, getting things like Super Breaks and, you know, all of the master cuts ones and all those, you know, those ones where you always in the bag because there's like 6 tunes you can play off them and whatever. And you know, there are like great compilations that are more, you know, like the Just a Touch one that was on Athens of the North, that was very much like all kind of street soul from that era. And what I wanted to do was something which was a bit of that, like here's the history lesson, but also a bit of here's what's going on now, so that you kind of draw the links between the two. So it's all British soul music. One side, the love side, is all sort of pre 2000s, and then the purpose side is all post 2000s, roughly speaking. And yeah, you know, kind of connected with some of the original artists from back in the day, from that kind of street soul era, which was amazing. And then also, you know, we got some of the new stuff, you know, Children of Zeus. There's a Earl Jeffers from Dark House Family had a great project under the Meta Beats name. There was a track on that which sounds like it could have been made in like 87 or something, and, you know, released on 10 records or something like that, or, you know, Intrigue or whatever. And yeah, it's been great. And like I said, I kind of felt it took me 5 years to put it out because I felt proper imposter syndrome, like, you know, getting to the thing of like, okay, you know, you put other people's records out and yeah, it's my taste, but it's their music. Whereas this is like, there's no one to fall back on but me, you know. And I really procrastinated on it because I was just like, oh, you know, who am I to start saying that I know what soul music is from this country or whatever. And yeah, but I'm glad I stuck with it, and it's been received really well. I'm really proud of it.
It's a great comment. I love the idea of the mixing the eras as well. I thought that was a really nice, you know, a slightly different thing compared to maybe a lot of compilations do as well. And obviously it's done with lots of love and care and great sleeve notes. So yeah. So check the Love and Purpose compilation. It's vinyl and digital.
It's on vinyl and it's on digital as well. Yeah, like there's like one track we couldn't clear for streaming, but all the rest of it's up there. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, Aly, thank you so much for doing this as well. So do you want to do any plugging of First Word or websites or wherever you are?
Sure.
So
go check our Bandcamp, firstwordrecords.bandcamp.com. And yeah, like Alicia Joy's new album, The Making of Silk, is probably be out by the time you watch this. And I'm really proud of it. I think Alicia's made a really amazing record. And we've got more coming up. You know, we've got new Kylie Tatham. We've got a reissue of Tall Black Guy's first album coming up. We've got the Record Store Day thing I mentioned. We've got a 4th volume of that. We like put it into a double LP compilation with the old ones and some new stuff, and some exciting new signings as well that you know, all will be revealed. But yeah, you know, it's sort of amazing how people keep making great music. It sort of never ends, right? It's a tap that doesn't switch off. So I'm very, very privileged to be able to hear some of that before everyone else does, and then share it with the world.
I'm just going to say personally, big up to you. I always like chatting with you, and I like what you do. It's always inspiring, you know. And for me, it just helps having other inspiring labels around. It just keeps like, and especially with what you're doing, because you do, like you were saying earlier, you're signing something that you don't know necessarily how it's going to do or what's going to do, but it is really good music. And I think that's maybe the space that I feel where we're at, and labels like you are, and it's important we are here and we keep doing this as well. So
completely, like, you know, we need more people making decisions with their heart rather than necessarily totally their head. I think I remember you saying something years ago of like something like, we're in the music industry, but we try and make it 80% music and 20% industry, or something like that. And I keep that in my mind too. So,
I think the famous phrase used to be, when I started, the music is 99% business, 1% music, and it was like, oh, we've got to try and move that ratio a little bit. So
cool.
Brilliant.
Nice one. Thank you, Rob. Cheers.